Hey folks, I've been meaning to do one of these educational videos on how the Swedish labor market, CBAs, unions, and so forth work. I wish I was doing this under better circumstances, but I'm not, so it is what it is. I'm doing this video now because of the announced strike at Klarna on November 7th. Because I think a lot of you think that this conflict is about something other than it's actually about. And that makes sense, because you need a decent amount of information on how things work in Sweden to really understand what's actually at stake. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Kim. I was at Klarna for about 7 years between 2015 and 2022. I was a back-end engineer. When I left the last 2 years, I was the resident payment architect in the domain called DBS, Decisioning, Banking, and Servicing. I left in May 2022. So suffice to say, I am well familiar with Klarna as a company, and sadly also the very anti-union tactics and propaganda that has been going on at that company for quite some time. Why I'm talking to you today is because, as I mentioned, the announced strike on November 7th. Because a lot of you think that this conflict is about wellness contributions or lunch compensation or Smooth Week, which Klarna put on that pamphlet. So last week, or I think it was this week actually, Klarna handed out one of these pamphlets, basically anti-union propaganda. And it was more or less a copy paste of what Spotify handed out in May this year. And they compare things like wellness contributions, which is not managed by CBAs, by the way. It's not governed by that. It's governed by the Swedish tax authorities. So it has nothing to do with the CBA. And it compares a bunch of perks, basically, that you have today at Klarna. And it compares it to the equivalent in CBAs. Except the fact then that a lot of the stuff that are mentioned are not governed by CBA, so it's kind of like an irrelevant comparison. But that's what they do. And it gives a very skewed image. And it's driving a narrative that CBAs somehow introduce a ceiling or a cap on vacation, salary, whatever, which is not what it does. The whole idea of CBAs and what the workers' rights movement have been doing in Sweden for the past 100+ years is to work to introduce a floor, a very minimum level that we want, or demand rather, that employers adhere to. So there is absolutely nothing stopping Klarna from signing a CBA and then just, offering more if they want to. Absolutely nothing. So I think what you should be asking yourself is, if we assume that the propaganda is true, that Klarna is offering you more than the CBA, which, by the way, if you do the math, it's not true. But if we for a second assume that they're offering you more, I think the question you should be asking yourself is, if that's true, why don't they want you to have a CBA? The CBA is lower, right, according to them. So they could just sign a CBA and give you less. Wouldn't that be good for them? Why aren't they excited about that? And that's a huge red flag. And that should tell you that the wellness contributions and the lunch compensation and all the other details that they're putting in their pamphlet, that's not what this conflict is about. Not at all. Because you know what this conflict is actually about? It's about the Swedish model. And it's about your right as employees to a seat at the table at Klarna. And what do I mean when I say the Swedish model? I mean that we have this idea in Sweden that is the foundation of how we organize on the labor market, that we do not want politicians and political policy to intervene on the labor market. We don't want politicians to set the terms. Instead, in Sweden, we consider the two parties on the labor market, employers, employees, equal partners. We want them to negotiate the terms on the labor market under which employees sell their time, expertise, knowledge to employers. That makes sense, right? You, as the employee or worker, selling your time, knowledge, expertise to the employer, of course, you should be a part of those negotiations. Of course, it should be those two equal parties that negotiate the terms. And it's as simple as that. And the manifestation of that idea and that way of organizing is the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement. And the reason Klarna and Spotify don't want you to have CBAs is because having one guarantees you, as workers of those companies, a seat at the table. Every major business decision that Klarna makes has to be negotiated with you as employees with the CBA in place. And that is the whole point. That's why they don't want you to go on strike. That's why they don't want you to have a CBA, because they want to deny you your right to a seat at the table. And that's what the conflict is about. That's why we're going on strike. That's why this is so important. It's not about wellness contributions. It's not about whether they pay for your lunch or not. It's about them wanting to not adhere to the Swedish model, them wanting to deny you your seat at the table. And please, don't let them. Show up for the strike on November 7th. Show your solidarity. Show that you understand the importance of maintaining the Swedish model, where employers and employees are considered equal partners on the labor market. Please take the time to educate yourself, to get engaged, and please join the strike November 7th. Divided we beg, united we bargain. Thank you for listening.